Look without judging. The morning mist gently settled over the rice fields, painting shapes that dissolved with every breeze. On the peaceful slope of a hill, where ancient trees seemed to whisper forgotten secrets, stood a small wooden temple. Its walls, worn by the passage of time, still carried the fragrance of old prayers and incense burned with devotion. There lived Master Ayan, an elderly man with clear eyes and a back bent by years. Yet his presence was as vast and silent as the dawn. He spoke only when necessary, and his disciples knew that true learning didn't come from his words, but from the way he looked at the world. One morning, a young man named Naoki arrived at the temple, his brow furrowed and heart restless. He had traveled from a distant village, weary of seeing only faults, contradictions, and disappointments in others. He longed to find peace but didn't know where to begin. Everything around him sparked judgment. His father's greed, his brother's weakness, the hypocrisy of the monks he met along the way. Even the wildflowers seemed vulgar if they weren't perfect. When Naoki stood before Master Ayan, the old man looked at him silently. Naoki lowered his gaze, expecting an assessment, a welcome, or perhaps a critique. But he received only silence. "Aren't you going to ask why I've come?" Naoki finally said. The master smiled faintly and pointed to the temple's inner garden. "Look," he said calmly. "Watch what's there for 1 hour. Then come back and tell me what you saw." Naoki obeyed. He sat before the Zen garden. Carefully raked gravel, stones placed with precision, a few shrubs trimmed with care. At first glance, it seemed simple, even boring. He didn't understand what he was supposed to learn. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The sun rose higher, casting new shadows across the gravel. The stones, which at first seemed randomly placed, began to take on meaning in their arrangement. He noticed a shrub with smaller leaves on one side, as if avoiding the shade of a nearby rock. He saw a beetle crawling slowly between grains of sand, unnoticed by anyone. When Naoki returned to the master, he looked confused. "At first, I saw nothing, just a dry garden. But then, I started noticing details. The shadows, the spaces between stones, the tiny paths the gravel traced unknowingly." Ayan looked at him calmly. "And what did you think of all that?" Naoki reflected. "Nothing. I just saw it." "Then," said the master, "for the first time you truly looked." Naoki frowned. The master continued, "When you judge, you don't see. You only project your ideas onto what's in front of you. You turn it into an extension of your opinions. But if you let what you see be simply what it is, then you begin to look." The young man nodded, unsure if he fully understood. But there was something in that hour of observation that touched him. Subtle, like the invisible shift between night and dawn. "How do I learn to look like that all the time?" The master stood silently, then walked toward the temple. Before entering, he turned back for a moment. "By learning not to tell yourself what you're seeing." Naoki stayed seated long after the master left. Facing the garden, with the distant sound of wind in the trees and crows calling in the sky, he let everything simply be, without naming, without judging, without trying to understand it all, just looking. In the days that followed, Naoki began to settle into life at the temple. There were few words, no clear instructions. Dawn found him sweeping the earthen floor, heating water for the rice, or carrying firewood from the forest. Everything was done slowly, with careful attention. At first, he grew frustrated. How could he find answers if no one was teaching him anything? One afternoon, as he was washing ceramic bowls under the setting sun, one slipped from his hands. It hit the ground with a sharp crack and broke into 3 pieces. Naoki froze. He looked around, hoping no one had seen, feeling shame rise up his neck like fire. But there was no one. Still, he ran to Master Ian, holding the broken pieces. "I broke it," he said, breathless. "It was an accident. I was distracted." The master took the broken bowl calmly. He studied it for a moment, then sat down on the tatami, motioning for Naoki to join him. Naoki sat. "What do you see?" Ian asked, showing him the bowl. "A broken bowl," the young man replied. "It's useless now. I ruined it." The master said nothing for a long moment. His eyes traced the cracks with quiet tenderness. "Are you sure you see a broken bowl? What else could it be?" Ian gently brought the 3 pieces closer together. The lines of the break formed a unique pattern, as if the pottery itself had chosen to split that way. Then he said, "This bowl is not broken. It has only stopped being what you thought it should be." Naoki was silent. When you see something and label it broken, ugly, or useless, you aren't seeing what it truly is. You're seeing your own reaction, your ideas about how it should be. But if you stop judging, you might discover something new. And what can you discover in a broken bowl? That depends on your eyes. Some see trash. Others see a way to piece it back with gold. Do you know the art of kintsugi? Naoki shook his head. Ancient Japanese masters didn't hide the cracks. They filled them with gold dust, making damage part of the beauty. The young man looked amazed. Ian carefully set the bowl on the table. To look without judging is to see with new eyes. It doesn't mean denying what happens. A bowl falls, a leaf dries, a life ends. But if you judge it immediately, you leave no room to discover what else it could be. That night, Naoki couldn't sleep. He thought of all the times he had judged others as broken, weak, or wrong. What if they had only changed shape like the bowl? What if he himself was also a piece waiting to be restored, not discarded? Before dawn, he rose quietly and walked to the workshop. He cleaned the ceramic pieces carefully and searched among the temple's supplies. He had no gold, but he found clear resin, some stone powder, and plenty of patience. The next morning, Ian found the bowl repaired, with a faint pale line marking its old fracture. He said nothing. He simply took it in his hands, caressed it with his fingers, and placed it on the highest shelf. There it remained, among the temple's most treasured objects. Seeing this, Naoki understood he had learned more from that broken bowl than from years of study. Not everything that changes is lost. Not everything that breaks stops being beautiful. And nothing can be truly seen until it has stopped being judged. The days began to flow like the streams surrounding the temple, neither rushed nor paused. Naoki no longer asked so many questions, not because he had all the answers, but because he had learned to listen to the silence between the questions. One morning, Master Ian gave him a new task. "Go to the river and fetch water every day for the inner garden," he said. "Use the wooden bucket by the bamboo." Naoki obeyed. Each dawn, before the other monks woke, he would descend to the riverbank, dip the bucket into the water, and return carefully, stepping among the wet stones and moss. One day, by the shore, he saw an old monk who didn't belong to the temple, barefoot, wearing a tattered robe, his hair tangled like dry branches. He seemed to talk to himself, tossing small stones into the water with each phrase. Naoki felt uneasy. He thought, he must be mad, and tried to avoid him. But the old man looked at him and spoke with a clear voice. "Do you see how the river doesn't choose which stones to surround?" Naoki stopped. "Excuse me?" The water flows not judging the shape of the rock, passes over, under, or stays still when it must. You, however, looked at me and decided something about me. The young man lowered his gaze, ashamed. "That wasn't my intention. Intention is not required to judge." It's just habit. The old man bent down and picked up a leaf from the water. Look at this leaf. It's dry, yet it floats. If you call it dead, you miss how it dances. If you call it beautiful, you lose the moment it sinks. What if you simply look at it without saying anything inside? Naoki remained silent. The leaf floated a little longer, then disappeared into a swirl. "Who are you?" he asked. "No one you need to know," the old man replied with a gentle smile. "Just someone who learned to see without naming everything. That saved me from drowning in my own thoughts." And with that, the old man walked away into the forest, leaving only the sound of the water and an inner echo that would not fade. Naoki returned to the temple with his bucket full, but with a heart fuller still, with questions that had no verbal answer. For the rest of the day, he couldn't shake the image of that floating leaf, of that nameless man who seemed to have seen something he was only beginning to sense. That night, he wrote in his practice journal, "Today I understood that judging is not just voicing opinions. It is building a wall between oneself and what lies before the eyes. Each time I judge, I stop seeing. Each time I name, I tighten a form that wants to be free. Maybe looking is simply allowing." Master Ian read that page days later and left it where it was, without comment. Like the river's water, like the floating leaf, like the gaze that doesn't name but only watches. One warm morning, as Naoki swept the stone path leading to the meditation pavilion, a sharp cry shattered the quiet of the forest. He stopped. It was a child's voice. He dropped the broom and ran toward where he thought the sound came from. By the lotus pond, a small novice, barely 7 years old, round-faced and wide-eyed, was stumbling backward. In front of him, a black snake slid slowly between the hot rocks. Instinctively, Naoki grabbed a stick from the ground and rushed toward the animal, ready to strike to protect the child. But just before acting, he heard Master Ian's voice from the veranda. "Naoki, stop!" The young man halted immediately. The child ran to the master, still trembling, while the snake, unaware of the drama, disappeared into the bushes. Still holding the stick, Naoki turned to Ian, his face flushed. "I was going to attack the snake. What was I supposed to do? Just watch." Ian descended the temple steps calmly, observing every step. "Are you sure it was going to attack?" Naoki hesitated. "It seemed dangerous." "Seemed?" the master repeated softly. "It was a snake. Could have been venomous. I didn't have time to think. I reacted." Ian knelt by the pond, inspecting the wet tracks where the snake had passed. "That snake has lived in the forest long before you arrived. It has never harmed anyone. It only comes to the sun to warm itself. You didn't see the snake. You saw your fear. You saw a learned story." Naoki lowered his gaze. "I didn't want to be wrong. And yet you almost were," Ian said, "for judging too quickly, for seeing through the lenses of should instead of mindful attention." The master looked up at him. "What if you had struck the snake? What if it was harmless? Who would have been the violent one? Who the true danger?" Naoki felt warmth in his face. Not anger, but shame. "So, should I have done nothing?" Ian shook his head gently. "You needed to see clearly. Neither react on impulse nor freeze in fear. Observe first. Feel what is there without the veil of judgment. Only then do you know what action is necessary and which arises from ego." The master glanced at the child, now calm. "And what did you see, little one?" The child thought for a moment. "I saw a snake. I was scared. But then I saw it wasn't looking at me. It was just passing by." I nodded. "Then you truly saw." That day, Naoki wrote a phrase that would stay with him forever. "Looking without judging is not inaction. It is pure attention." It is seeing before reacting, feeling before defining, and acting only when the heart is free of noise. From that moment on, whenever an emotion pushed him to speak, correct, protect, or criticize, he took a deep breath and asked himself, "Am I truly seeing what is, or what I believe it to be?" And in that breath, wisdom was born. Autumn began to dress the nearby forests in gold. Leaves fell in slow spirals, carpeting the dirt paths. It was harvest time. A deeper silence, cold dawns, and clear skies. Naoki spent more time alone. His gaze had grown calmer, yet more sensitive. Still, a shadow followed him like a stone in his bag. He couldn't stop judging another monk in the temple, a young man named Ryu. Ryu was careless. He spilled water when serving tea. He spoke when he should be silent. He dozed off during zazen. To Naoki, he seemed a mess. Though he never said it aloud, every one of Ryu's gestures sparked silent irritation in him, like a hidden thorn that stings. One afternoon, while sweeping the tatami in the meditation hall, Ayan approached and, without looking directly at him, asked, "Have you observed your reflection today?" Naoki was puzzled. "My reflection?" "Yes, the reflection you see in others." The young man lowered his broom. "Master, what do you mean?" Ayan walked to a polished wooden pillar and caressed its surface. The fading light of sunset reflected faintly on it. When water is calm, it reflects the sky. When it's muddy, it distorts even the sun. "What do you see when you look at Ryu?" Naoki hesitated. Then, honestly, he answered, "I see someone lazy, immature, not taking the teachings seriously." "And what bothers you about that?" "I don't know. Maybe it reminds me of myself before I came here." Silence grew heavy. Ayan didn't respond right away. "So, when you look at him, who are you judging?" Naoki swallowed hard. His thoughts swirled like dry leaves in the wind. "Myself," he whispered. "That's right," the master said gently. "Sometimes what annoys us most in others is what we haven't wanted to see in ourselves. What still hurts, what remains unhealed." Ayan invited him to sit across from him. "Watch Ryu tonight, but without naming him, without defining him. Don't say he is this or he is that. Just observe. Don't contaminate the moment with your story. Maybe then you'll see him for the first time." That night, during the tea ceremony, Naoki watched. Ryu spilled some water. He laughed awkwardly. But Naoki didn't think, "He's messing up again." He thought nothing. He just saw him. He saw him tremble slightly as he served. He saw him glance sideways at the elders, seeking approval. He saw him adjust his posture and take a deep breath, as if trying to do it right, though he didn't know how. And in that moment, judgment vanished. In its place, unexpected compassion arose. Naoki remembered his first month there, the fear of failing, the desire to be accepted, the clumsiness of someone still learning the rhythm of a new place. That night, he wrote in his journal, "To judge another is to forget their story. To look without judging is to remember that they also bleed, also tremble, also want to do well." Since then, whenever a critical feeling arose seeing Ryu, Naoki would breathe and think, "This is me too." And in that recognition, everything became more human. Kinder, truer. A gray morning, rain fell on the temple roofs like soft fingers tapping an ancient drum. Mud mixed with fallen leaves, and the air smelled of living earth and silence. The monks swept the hallways, hung damp robes by the fire, or simply watched the drops slide down the paper windows. That day, a beggar approached the temple. He was wrapped in soaked rags, his feet bare and cracked. His face was smudged with soot, and his gaze wandered as if he belonged nowhere. The younger monks eyed him with suspicion. Some grimaced at his smell. No one spoke to him. Naoki watched from afar while gathering firewood. His first thought was automatic. Why does he come here? Aren't there other places to beg? But instantly, he remembered the master's words. When you judge, you stop seeing. So he took a deep breath and approached. Would you like something warm? He asked. The beggar looked up, surprised by the kindness. A little soup, if there's any to spare, he whispered. Naoki invited him to sit under the temple's eaves and brought him a steaming bowl. Then he covered him with a light blanket. The man said little. He ate slowly, as if each spoonful were a divine gift. When Ayan came near and saw the scene, he said nothing. He simply sat beside Naoki, watching the visitor eat. Today, the master said after a while, I've learned more from this man than from all my books. Naoki looked at him in astonishment. From him, master? Ayan smiled. Yes. He taught me how many times I've stopped seeing because I thought I already knew what was before my eyes. He turned to the beggar. What is your name? The man hesitated a moment. I don't have a fixed one. They call me whatever they want. Crazy, dirty, shadow. Ayan nodded, unmoved. Then today I will call you master of reflection. The beggar stopped eating and looked at him silently. A strange light shone in his moist eyes. Why that? Because your presence has revealed the hidden thoughts of those who saw you. You have been a mirror. You've shown without speaking who still judges and who is learning to see. The beggar lowered his head, and for the first time in a long while he smiled. That night, as the visitor left into the mist, the monks remained silent. The temple seemed wider, lighter, as if new windows had opened within. Naoki wrote calmly, There is no one who has nothing to teach me. Sometimes the wisest come without clean clothes, without manners, without titles. But they always bring a mirror, and that mirror doesn't show the other. It shows me. And so, the teaching of looking without judging stopped being an idea. It became practice, compassion, a way of being. From then on, every person who crossed the temple's gate, whoever they were, was received not with the eyes of what they seemed to be, but with the deep gaze of one who has already learned to see without the filter of judgment. Time continued its silent, circular course, like the whirlpools in the pond's water. Winter was beginning to peek over the mountain edges, and the morning air grew crisper. The pines creaked softly as they swayed, and the cawing of crows accompanied the morning meditation like a reminder of impermanence. One morning, Master Ayan called Naoki and led him to a forgotten corner of the temple where weeds had grown wild and unchecked for years. This will be your new garden, the master said. Not for you to change it, but to look at it. Naoki frowned. Brambles climbed over the stones. Wildflowers grew tangled with dry grass and broken branches. There was no symmetry, no apparent beauty. What do you want me to do with it? Nothing, Ayan replied. Just observe it every day for 1 hour. And don't say inside yourself, this is good or this is bad. Just look at what is. Naoki didn't fully understand but obeyed. Day after day, he sat in front of the wild corner of the temple and watched it. The first week, his mind resisted. He thought about pruning, which plants to remove, how to organize everything so it looked better. He told himself, this is a mess, this is useless, this is poorly cared for. But as days passed, his gaze began to change. He noticed how the vines delicately clung to the rocks, how some flowers grew between cracks with a powerful fragility, how dry leaves sheltered insects from the cold and offered food to the birds. He no longer saw chaos. He saw dance. He no longer saw disorder. He saw hidden harmony. One noon, as he brushed leaves from his robe, Master Ayan approached. And, he asked, what have you seen in this garden? Naoki smiled without looking at the master, his eyes fixed on a butterfly fluttering among the nettles. I've seen. It doesn't need to be changed to be perfect. Ian sat beside him. And you? Naoki took a deep breath. Neither do I. The master closed his eyes, satisfied. When you stop judging, the garden reveals itself. Not the garden you wish for, but the one that is. The same happens with you, and with others. When you stop wanting to prune the parts you don't understand, you discover the harmony of what once seemed disorder. A gentle silence wrapped around them. Naoki understood, deep within, that looking without judging was not just tolerating but seeing with deep acceptance. With love, with presence. It was to see without interference, feel without classification, be without resistance. In that moment, the garden was no longer outside him. It was his heart. It was the world. And all was part of the same balance, the same silent choreography that dances when no one tries to correct it. Winter had finally arrived. The temple was covered by a soft white layer of snow, gentle as the breath of the skies. Everything grew quieter. Even footsteps became whispers. The bare branches of the cherry trees rested patiently, and the steam from cooking rice floated like invisible incense through the corridors. Naoki woke before dawn as usual, but something inside him had changed. He no longer rose to complete tasks. He rose to be, to look, to see without burdening the world with the weight of his thoughts. One morning, during the tea ceremony, Master Ian served everyone in complete silence. Then he turned to Naoki and asked, "What do you see when you look at this cup?" Naoki took the cup in his hands. He didn't answer right away. He observed its irregular shape, the faint trace of a restored crack, the steam rising in uncertain spirals. "I don't see a cup. I see the clay that was kneaded, the hands that shaped it, the fire that hardened it, the time that wore it down, the water it now holds. All of that is here." Ian nodded with a smile. "And yet, you're not judging any of it." "No, because I don't need to," Naoki said without arrogance. Ian took a sip and set the cup on the bamboo tray. "Then you can teach." Naoki was surprised. "Teach, not with words, not with gestures, only with your way of seeing. Whoever sees without judgment offers peace effortlessly, like a lake. It does not speak, does not impose, does not correct, but everyone who looks into it sees themselves clearly." That day, Naoki understood the true purpose of his stay at the temple. He had not come to change the world, nor to fix himself as if he were a broken machine. He had come to remember how to look. In the following months, he became a silent presence inspiring calm. To the new disciples who arrived anxious, doubtful, or with preconceptions, he offered no answers. He offered space. He offered pure attention. And many of them, without knowing why, began to feel lighter. Because when someone looks at you without judgment, something inside you loosens. As if you could finally exist without defense. As if the most tired part of you said, "At last, someone sees me." Naoki often sat before the wild garden that no one called neglected anymore. The flowers grew free like his gaze. The wind whispered among the leaves, as if it too celebrated the state where nothing needed to change to be perfect. One day, while watching a beetle cross a stone, a silent tear rolled down his cheek. It was not sadness, nor joy. It was the peace of not having to understand everything, of simply looking, of not carrying the burden to decide if something was good or bad, enough or lacking, right or wrong. And in that judgment-free gaze, all that existed was simply free. Free of labels, free of condemnation, free of its own story. And so was he.